Hello, hello, hello. Hello and welcome to Spindle TV. How are y'all doing tonight? Got an exciting topic. I think it's exciting, kind of a fun one. It's one that I've actually never done before, in a class I've never done before. So um, it's unique in that aspect, or in that respect. We're going to be talking about creating custom effects, text effects, and things like that, textures for text, or backgrounds and things like that. Which we've talked about textures for backgrounds and all, but this is uniquely for using text as the main subject and everything. So it ought to be really interesting, and I think you'll enjoy it. Let me get things minimized and all this stuff. Speaking of stuff, hopefully y'all are doing well. I was ill the last couple of days, but we're getting back on track, and I think it just worked a little much. I'm just getting into 3D printing for any of you guys and girls that are fans of 3D printing. That's a new world for me. I'm learning. But it's it's much different than what I'm used to doing. I'm dabbling, which I told myself I would never do, but I'm dabbling in Fusion 360, which is great for 3D printing and everything. Yeah, it's an interesting world. I kind of dove all in. I bought myself a little 3D print farm, if you will. Got 6 3D printers going, printing little things like little clips and stuff and all kinds of fun things. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get to rocking and rolling here. Let's see who we got in the chat. We got everybody. I want to thank my exclusive members for joining me tonight. Last night we didn't have a class, the exclusive members. We normally have a private class on Wednesdays, and I say normally because sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And but my exclusive members are here tonight, so thank you all for joining me tonight. I was not in a state the last couple of days to be in front of a camera, smiling, if you will. I even still sound a little monotone right now. John Thompson's been 3D printing for years. Yeah, John, I'll tell you this right now. One, I'm just learning 3D printing, and it's the bed leveling, right? I want to throw a wasteboard on it so bad. I want to put a wasteboard on the bed and surface it right. I want to create this surface. That's how we level our CNCs, right? We throw a wasteboard on and we run a surfacing toolpath. I want to do that so bad. Oh my God, bed leveling on these units. Finally got it, and they're doing well. They're printing well. But filament, I want to change over to resin printing now, because all of it's, the whole road is leading to injection molding, and with a resin printing, I'll be able to make fairly strong injection molds. Stronger than if I tried to filament print them or something like that. But I got an injection molding. These parts that I'm currently 3D printing right now, they're gonna eventually be injected molding, so I don't have to print them, right? Anyhow, I'm learning. I literally just starting. Got a new 3D scanner coming. It'll be here Saturday, so I can scan some things to help me with making the models and all. So really diving in kind of head first. All right, everybody, that's enough of that stuff. Let's talk about textures and everything tonight. Now, tonight I'm going to be working in Vectric, Aspire, but everything that we can, most everything that we're doing can be accomplished in Vectric, VCarve, Desktop Pro, or Aspire. Now, there are going to be some certain Aspire features that are only for Aspire. I'll let you know when we get to those. But a lot of this stuff can be done in Desktop Pro or Aspire. One case example is, let me switch over to my full screen and let's rock and roll here. Let's share an entire window. And just as an example, this sign here, let's turn off the color and just go back to regular piece of wood, if you will. Let's say we'll just go maple for right now. But this effect here and everything, especially the raised effect with the text and textures and the text and all that, can all be done in like Vectric, VCarve, Desktop Pro, or Aspire and things like that. All right, let's rock and roll with this, and let's get this going here, and let's see what we can accomplish and stuff. So for tonight, I want to show you some of the graphics, some of the images that I'm going to be working with, and some of the graphics and all that, we're going to, turn into vectors and things like that, that we're going to play with for different types of textures. And so let's start with, here's some feathers. We're going to see what we can do with an image of some feathers, some blades of grass, river rock, more river rock, piles of leaves, fish scales, right? Some scales, another kind of scales, grunge, a little bit of grunge, swirls, wood grain, and then just texturing toolpath. So these images, these images here, we're going to try to some of them, not the blades of grass or the feathers and all. We'll deal with those later, in the more advanced part of it all. But the wood grain, the fish scales, and things like that, the swirls, we're going to see if we can turn those into some kind of fun textures and stuff. So again, welcome everybody. Let's see if we can jump right in and see what we can make and everything with this. So for tonight, I am simply just going to work with a project that is going to be, let's go 24 on its width, and it could be anything, right? I'm just making up numbers here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go with a height of 11 1/4 and a thickness of 3/4 of an inch thick. We will touch off on the material surface, and then for this, we'll start in the bottom left corner is fine. And I have a resolution here set to maximum. I'm going to back that down to an extremely high. We'll deal with that and talk about model resolutions and everything when we get into working with the 3D model part of this. But I'm going to click OK. And how do we get to that extremely high? Because when I set up a job, Laney, all I see is maximum 7 times. I don't see anything there. Well, you hold your shift key down. After your initial job setup, you can hold your shift key down and you can come back into the job window here. And when you do that, it'll show you 2 additional options, extremely high and maximum. Now, I really rarely only use maximum when I'm actually making something that I would, sell to a customer or provide to a customer or something like that. Other than that, if I'm doing it for myself, I work in extremely high. And if I'm not working with models at all, then by default, I always set it to very high, right? So I'm never sitting just in standard or high in my job setup, regardless of if I'm working with models or not. I make it part of my routine to be very high, at least. So it becomes muscle memory in my job setup, just in case I do work with models. Well, at least I have a decent resolution to deal with. And we'll go from there. Now, with that being said, if anybody knows how to keep a office chair, let me see here, from sinking. If you're wondering, like when I'm here, like here I am down here in the corner. But if you're wondering, as I get lower and lower and lower, and I start to sink behind my name right there that says Laney Shaughnessy right here, I'm not crouching down in my chair and everything. My seat is slowly sinking. My office chair slowly sinking, and every once in a while I gotta jack it back up. Oh, janky. Oh, Lord of mercy. Okay, so let's really quickly. This will be sure how to help you. Alexa, stop. You don't need to help me. I'm helping them. Okay. So this will be educational. This will be something interesting for you to see. This will be something for interesting to see. What role does this modeling resolution play? What does it actually do? Right? What does it actually do? Let's take a look at it. I'm going to set it to a standard on a project here that's 24 by 11 1/4, right? By 3/4 inches thick. I'm going to set OK on this setup. And I want to let's bring in a piece of clip art for this. We'll bring in the old alligator here. And let's pretend that my alligator, let's pretend that I'm using a small model right here, a 3D model, and I got this big board. Now, with my job setup, right, and we're going to get into text in a minute, but I think this is educational. I think this will be important for everyone to understand. In my job setup, in that standard resolution, it's set to use 1 million points or pixels, whatever you want to say, call it points. But think of it as little squares. There are, across my entire board here, there's 1 million little squares in rows and columns, stacked side by side, edge to edge, top to bottom, all across this sheet. There's 1 million of them. In my high setting, there's 2 million of them. In the very high setting, there's 4 million squares. And if we go back to the extremely high, that's 8 million squares, and the maximum is 16 million squares, right? Quadrupling, quadrupling, quadrupling. So standard 1 million squares is spread across this board. Now, my model is a very small model here, right? And so my model, the mesh of the model, is only using a very small portion of these little squares. And therefore, when we go and look at the 3D view and everything, let me close this 3D view here. When we go look at the 3D view, my model is very pixelated, right? All those little squares and everything. And pixelation, this resolution, 100%, folks, translates over to the quality of the finished carving. Okay? So this pixelation that's in my alligator right now, that's the quality of the cut that I'm actually going to get from this. Now, let's say that my alligator is taking up more of those 1 million pixels, right? So now it's larger, and the 1 million pixels is now, there's more of them inside the alligator and everything. We are, now taking up more pixels, so we're getting a little bit clearer, right? We're getting less pixelation and everything. We get a little bit smoother. Okay, so a little bit smoother here, right? Now, so that being said, if I'm working with a model or something, I want to keep my my area, you know, the job size and all, I want it to take up as much of those pixels as I can for the best resolution. Now, let's say I can't do that. Let's say I am working with a small model here, and the model, you know, is, taking up only a small portion of my sign, that 1 million pixels. Well, then I need to go in there and I need to increase that resolution. I need to increase the number of squares, you know, throughout that job and everything that's, you know, making up that model. And so I'm now at, 4 million pixels. I went from 1 million pixels to 4 million pixels here. And we can see that my small little model is getting a little clearer here, right? So much clearer. And if I hold down the shift key and I come into the job setup and I can quadruple that to 8 million pixels, or double that, 4 million to 8 million, or I can bring it to 16 million pixels, right? Boom, boom. And with that maximum strength. And so now, you know, when we come in and everything, we are much clearer on the quality and the detail and everything, you know, in that much higher resolution. That little model is only taking up a portion of my board, right? But the resolution, I have more squares now. I have more pixelation. I have more pixels in there. I've got 16 million instead of 1 or 4 or 8. And so now my model is getting a little bit more, that mesh of that model is getting a lot more pixels, so it can, you know, be much smoother, right? Now, if this alligator was taking up, again, with my 16 million pixels, my maximum resolution, it was taking up, you know, more of my work area, then the quality, let me get off the red here, the quality of the model is going to be really crisp and sharp and everything, and really smooth and all. But in this case, I want this to be kind of like a little stamp, if you will. I want the gator to be down here in the corner, so it's using less pixels. So I need to give it more pixels. I need to give it more resolution and stuff like that, so that, you know, even at a small model, the quality is, you know, still there, right? You know, the what am I trying to say? The quality is still there and everything. So that's resolution, ladies and gentlemen. That's resolution, and that's and pixelation. If I'm setting up a job that's got a 3D model in it, I'm in a standard or, you know, high or something like that, and my model has pixelated, you know, that pixelation is going to translate over to the quality of the finished carve. It does translate to the quality of the finished carve, right? So higher resolution when you're working with models and stuff. So by default, I set it to a very high, but I am going to be working with models throughout this class. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that very high. But now I'm going to hold my shift key down. I'm going to go back to the job setup. I'm going to go down, and now I have those two extra options, extremely and maximum. And I'll just use the extremely high for now. And that'll be that. Okay, so just wanted to get that out of the way, teach you a little bit about resolution, and jack myself back up. There we go. And then we'll get started. How much more southern can you be drinking sweet tea out of a mason jar? Okay, here we go. All right, so let's get rocking and rolling here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about textures. Now we have a vector texture tool over here on the left in our drawing tools, where we can create line type textures. And these lines, depending on what degree we go, let's say I go at a 15 degree angle here, and I want my line spacing, let's go 3/8 of an inch apart. And on my amplitude and wavelength, amplitude and wavelength, let's say that I want an amplitude of 3/4 and a wavelength of 1.5 inches. No noise for right now, just to create that, and we can click preview. And what that's going to give us, it's going to give us these wavy lines, right? So the texture, the create vector texture tool, gives us this pattern of lines. Now, let's say that I wanted the lines to be, noisy, have a little bit of noise, like a little bit of erraticness to them. I could turn the noise up and everything, and it's going to kind of give it a little bit of noise, right? So they're not going to be so smooth. I could give the wavelengths, a little less wave. We'll go a little less noise. We don't need a lot of noise here. The wavelength, I could probably maybe even go almost the full length of my board on my wave. So let's see, if I'm 24 inches, let's go 12 inches here on the wavelength. Preview that. And I can start to, let's get rid of the angle. Let's take the angle down to, 0. Oops, I hit OK and not instead of preview. Let's take this to 0 and preview. So I could start to possibly, depending on what I do, I could possibly start to kind of emulate like a wood grain, right? With these lines and everything. I could start to kind of play with them a little bit and all. And let's take the spacing down a little. Oops, too many decimal points. And I could start to maybe pick, possibly, emulate kind of a wood grain or, a grit or a grain or something, right? So the Create Vector Texture tool in the drawing tools, it's lines, right? Spacing of the lines, wavelength, amplitude, the high and low. Is there noise? Are they smooth? What angle they are? But it's lines. There's no randomness to it. There's no chaos, right? There's no, nothing. It's just lines and everything. And I find myself very rarely do I use that Create Vector Texture toolpath. I very rarely use it. But in tonight's class, we're talking about textures and all. Anything goes, right? We can create all kinds of little patterns and see how it looks. All right, so let's hit cancel on that. Let's turn that off for a minute. Now, there's another over here on the right-hand side, on the toolpath side. There is a texturing toolpath. And this texturing toolpath, you can use any router bit you want, V-bit, end mills, ball nose, and each type of bit gives you a different effect. An end mill is more kind of chunky and choppy. A V-bit is more slicey, like a knife slicey. Ball nose is more of a scoop, like, a hand-hewn look, scooped in things. Larger ball nose versus smaller ball nose, bigger scoops versus smaller scoops, and that kind of thing. Same thing with your end mills, bigger chop versus smaller chop, bigger slice versus smaller slice, all that stuff. But we can use, different router bits with it. And my go-to bit when I'm doing a texturing toolpath is my 1/8" tapered ball nose. My 1/8" tapered ball nose is my go-to. Now, with the texturing toolpath, we can use selected vectors as a pattern, right? We can check this box and use selected vectors as a pattern, meaning that we could come back over, and if we did have that pattern, that vector texture tool pattern and everything here, we could come in and we could use those vectors as the path or pattern that we're going to cut. Now, when we notice that when I check this box that says use selected vectors as the pattern, it's no longer kind of random. I come in here and the texture settings turns everything invisible. It hides everything except for the maximum and minimum depth of cut, that randomness in the depth of cut. So it lets me use this wood pattern or this line pattern, and I can adjust the depth of cut and the type of bit that I'm using that's going to cut along this vector, right? These vectors. And but that's about all the randomness I get out of that, if I don't have any vectors selected over here, let's say there's no vectors selected, and I am coming in and just wanting to create a kind of a random pattern, then I can do maximum and minimum cut length, maximum and minimum cut depth and cut length, the overlap, how much the cuts overlap themselves, how much they step over, from one another and things like that, what angle they're going at, and then also the boundary offset. I can, how far do I stay away from other objects and things, right? So now I can start to really create some random patterns and all. And with this, you've probably seen classes and all, and we're going to do one here right now in just a second, but you've probably seen where I have maybe put a texture in the background of a raised sign or something like that and everything. And we typically, reserve the texture for the background. But tonight, we're going to have the texture be the foreground, the top of the text, right? We're going to add some texture to our text and stuff. Let's take a look at a sign with a textured background. And we'll evolve from there. So let's get a visual of a textured background and everything, just using the texturing toolpath to create the texture. And then we'll get into all the feathers, the grass, the rocks, the grain, the grunge. I love the grunge. The grunge textures, paint splatters, all that stuff, all those types of vectors or images that we can trace and turn into vectors. All of those can be used as patterns for textures, which is awesome. All right, so let's get started with first things first. We're going to we're going to create a rectangle. We're going to draw a rectangle. Let me get up here where y'all can see me. And in the rectangle tool, we are going to, the anchor point is going to be the center of my board here. So I'm going to take my x-axis and I'm going to divide that by 2 and hit equals. I'm going to take my y-axis. I'll divide that by 2 and hit equals. And that's going to anchor me right at the center of my board for this rectangle, that 12 and 5 and, 5/8 and all, right? So that's going to be my anchor. Now on here, on the corner type, I'm going to do an internal radius, a 3/4 inch internal radius, just for this example. And on my width, I'm going to come in 3/4 of an inch off of each side of the board. So I'm going to take my x-axis and I'm going to subtract 1.5 inches from the x equals. I'm going to subtract 1.5 inches, y minus 1.5 equals. Y 1.5 inches, if you didn't catch on to that, 3/4 off the left, 3/4 off the right equals 1.5 inches. 3/4 and 3/4 is 1.5 inches. So I'm taking 1.5 inches off the width of my x, and I'm taking 1.5 inches off the height of my y. So when I do that, it creates my border here centered on the board with that 3/4 inch offset on all 4 sides, and also my 3/4 inch internal radius, right? Very good. Cool. All right, so let's create a sign. We're going to come in here and let's do a simple text box. I will say this. Let me preface this. This is very important. Preface this. I think that's the proper term. Wider text. Your wider text is going to benefit from the textures a whole lot more than your more narrow text, your weak, flimsy text, your cursive scripts and thin lines and Edwardian scripts and blah, blah, blah. Those, smaller, daintier fonts, they're really not going to be able to take a good texture, and they're really not going to look very well. They're not going to be strong enough when cutting and all that they won't be, easily broken and fragile and things. So when we're dealing with this, when we're doing this, we're wanting a font that's got some, it doesn't have to be all big and fat and bulky and all, but it's got to have some substance to it, right? And everything. So when you're looking through your fonts, you know, try to avoid, you know, your small, dainty little fonts and everything, and try to work with fonts that have a little bit of heft to them, you know, to their style and things like that, whatever it is, whatever it may be. So it will be better for the textures and things like that if you do. All right, so with that being said, let's come in here and we'll go with a 1 3/4 inch tall text for it to start off with. And let's say that we were doing a golf sign or something like that, or whatever, you know, on the golf course, or a park, you know, trail sign, or just a sign for our house, whatever the case may be. Let's say that I put myself on the spot. I don't know any famous parks. Let's go with St. John's River State Park. Okay. All right. We're going to make sure that's centered. Let's go ahead and go align to the center of the board. And St. John's River State Park. We'll just let's stick with that for right now. Now on this, I want to go bold. If there is a bold option, there's no bold option on this font, but you know, if there were, I want to go bold. And again, I want to avoid dainty little fonts and things like that. You know, fonts that that's what that one's vertical. But I want to avoid. Let's get down to you know, fonts that are real, you know, thin, that could break easily and things like that. We want to, when we're looking through our font list and everything, I mean, you can see, but you can also go to wordmark.it, wordmark, M-A-R-K.it, and you wordmark it. You can look at wordmark it, and you can look and see what certain fonts look like and things like that. You can see, you can get a visual and stuff, but you know, when we're looking, you know, look for those heavier type fonts. All right, so the for this one, we can just, the veranda's fine, or the one that I was using was the Perpetua Mount Bold, right? A little bit more decorative, if you will. You know, it can really be anything. Let's go back and you know, it could be whatever you want it to be. Let's look at STUV. We'll go with that for now. Okay, so let's say that this is my sign. I want to, let's increase it just a little bit. All right. Now, if I was doing a texture in the background, right? Check myself up. If I was doing a texture in the background, I would select all of the vectors, the border too, inside border, all the text. I'd come over here and I would say that, you know, pick a ball nose bit or whatever bit you wanted to use. In this case, I'll use an 1/8 inch ball nose bit. I'm going to start at 1/8 of an inch because that's what I'll do my VCarve raised text to, because the texture looks really good when it's raised. Leaving the use selected vectors unchecked because I want it to be a random pattern and everything. Let's say that I have a maximum cut depth of 1/8 of an inch with a minimum of a 1/16. It'll randomize between those two. Let's say I have a maximum cut length of 1 inch with a minimum of a 1/2 inch. It'll randomize between those two. I'll leave the overlap about a 30% overlap like that. Step over, I like stepping over half the diameter of the bit. Got an 1/8 inch diameter bit, I'll step over a 1/16. I like an angle. I like a bit of an angle, 10 degree, 15 degree, 20, 30, 45. The reason being is because we as human beings, our eyes, when we read things, when we look at things, when we observe things, we scan from left to right. It's just our nature. We scan from left to right. We read from left to right and everything. So when I'm looking at a sign or something, I don't want the texture and all to be distracting. And I don't want my eyes picking up on it, you know, like, and not being able to see all the other beautiful details in it or whatever. I want it, you know, kind of like I want it to blend in. So if I angle that texture slightly and everything, it'll play a trick on our brain, and it won't be the first thing we actually pick up, right? We'll be able to observe the beauty of the detail and all that stuff, and then we'll be able to enjoy or observe the texture and what it brings to the sign, right? So in this case, I'll go a 35-degree angle. Now, I don't want the ball nose bit hitting my border or my letters, so I will step away from them by 1/8 of an inch on that vector boundary offset, and I will calculate that toolpath. I'll create that texture. Now I'm going to come in here and delete these other toolpaths that are were just me playing around earlier. Delete all the visible toolpaths, and then I'm actually going to come in here. I kind of went with the texture first since we were talking about that, but now I'm going to make the actual sign. It's going to be a VCarve toolpath. I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to cut down 1/8 of an inch. I will use a 1/4 inch end mill and an 1/8 inch end mill along with that 60-degree V bit to do some flat area work, you know, in between and around the letters and stuff. I'm going to raster cut this with the grain. I'm going to calculate this toolpath. And what that will do is when I cut that, that gives me that raised effect, right? So when we have an object, in this case our text, surrounded by another object, in this case our border, when we select those two objects together, it's going to carve between those two objects, and so it's going to carve around all those letters. It's going to have them raised up like you see here, and it's going to give us that raised effect right on the letters. So that's what we're going to get, right? And so now, taking this step further, we're going to add the texture to it. So when it comes in, we're going to come in and add the texture that we created in the background, that random texture. And, you know, when we come in here and take a look, we have that just kind of that like scoop, that little texture and everything. And depending on, and I'm only going, and this texture is only an 1/8 inch deep, 16th inch, you know, and it's randomized between those two depths and all, but it adds that texture. Well, you know, normally when you're looking at texturing toolpaths and all, that's what we're seeing. You're seeing the texture happen in the background and everything. Tonight's class, we're going to add texture to the foreground. We're going to give the text some texture, some body, some character and everything. Yeah, we can have texture in the background. We can have, you know, whatever we want in the background, but we're going to give the letters some texture. So how can we do that, right? How can we do that? Well, on that texturing toolpath, I could have just turned off the vector boundary, and that texturing pattern would be carved on the items that are selected, right? That texture could be carved on the items that are selected and everything. Well, I don't want the texture running right up to the edge. I like to have a little bit of an edge still. You know, I want the texture, you know, coming close to the edge, but not right up on it. So one of the things I can do is, I would probably not say 1/8 of an inch. That's too much, right? So if I 1/8 of an inch off the edge, that's a little bit much, man. That's not going to give me a whole lot of texture on these smaller letters and things like that. So I might be you know, a 32nd or a 64th or something like that. So 0.03125 divided by 2. So 0.015625, 64th of an inch. Might stay off each edge by a 64th of an inch, so I'm not running right up to the edge with that ball nose bit and everything. And if I calculate this at all, reset this preview, then the texture, let's go in and do our raised sign still first. Our raised letters, you know, still doing the raised letters, but now we're going to add a texture just to the surface of those raised letters. Now, my depth of cut is too deep, too deep, right? Let's go back in there. Let's do that again, but this time let's take the start depth off and let's put it at 0. We're not cutting down 1/8 of an inch. Let's try that one more time. Let's undo that last. So once again, we have our raised letters there. We're not starting at 1/8 of an inch. We're starting at 0 when we're doing the top of the text and all. So let's try that again. And let's add a little bit of texture to the top of the letters and everything. And now let's say that I don't want to go 1/8 of an inch deep. Let's say 1/8 of an inch is a little bit much, you know, for the texture, right? You know, in here, let's bring that down a little bit, right? Because it's a subtle texture, a little bit of character, not a lot, right? You're not overdoing it. So let's bring this down to a 1/16 with a minimum depth of a 32nd. We'll let it randomize between those two depths. And then we have, you know, the 1 inch is kind of cutting the full length of the letters, which looks great and everything, but let's chunk it up a little bit more. Let's actually go on a maximum cut length. Let's go 3/8 on that. We'll still use the overlap of 30, the step over of a 16th, the angle, 35-degree angle, and we're still stepping off the edges by a 64th of an inch. You know, we're not running up on those edges. We're keeping those edges as they are. And if you want, we can go more. So let's double that. Let's see what it looks like doubled. Let's go a 32nd, 03125, just for kicks and giggles. Let's calculate that. And what you'll see, let's undo that last cut. What you'll see is the blue lines here where the texture is going to cut. They're stopping that 32nd of an inch off the edge. I like the 64th. I like kind of going right up to the edge, but this will be off the edge a bit. So let's take a look at that. And so we have, you know, we've reduced the, you can see, let's get my resolution turned up here. It's already turned up. There we go. Let me preview that again. There we go. All right. And so, you know, we've got, if you look here, we're off the edge by that 32nd of an inch all the way around and everything. We've got this nice little texture. And again, I'm using a ball nose bit, so it's got that scoopy look to it, you know, right? So that little scooped look to it and everything. We could use an end mill. We could use a V bit. We could use whatever we want. And you know, it gives us kind of that background. Now, let's say that we wanted to, you know, do that, but we, you know, maybe we are painting this sign, and maybe we're painting this sign. Oh Lord, let's see. We'll just go with a brown for right now. Brown. How now? It's not really a brown. This is a brown down here, but anyway, that's fine. You know, and let's say we paint the background or what have you, and then, you know, maybe the foreground, the border and everything, maybe we painted that too. Maybe it was painted Not black. I don't know. Maybe it was painted white, whatever, you know. And all we did in this case is we just gave the letters, you know, the top of the letters, just a little bit of character, right? You know, just a little bit of something. You know what I mean? Now let's go back to no color. And so, and let's take our board color from white. Let's go back to just kind of maple for right now. But we just kind of gave it some kind of, you know, character. All right, so that's one way, right? The texturing tool path, selecting your vectors, just the letters, and then creating the toolpath, the texturing toolpath on that. Now let's come over here and let's take these same vectors for the text here, and we'll use the line one, the vector texture toolpath. Angle, again, give it a little bit of an angle. We'll go 15 this time on the angle. On the spacing, let's go 3/16, so 1.1875. We'll go amplitude of 20, quarter of an inch, 0.25. In the full length, instead of the lines coming across, we could actually go shorter. We could go, like something like this. No noise for right now. Let's hit preview, and you'll see that, you know, it fills the letters up with those lines, right? And we can, you know, whatever bit we want to use can cut across those lines. Let's see if we can shorten that up. Let's see if we can get a little bit more randomness here on the wavelength. Let's go 1 inch. And let's add a little bit of noise. Okay. So you can see that pattern there, right? And so now in the case of this, if I was doing that, then, you know, I would select that pattern, and you see how it went right up to the edge. I mean, it's right up on the edge. So let me back up. Let me back up a little bit. Let me back up a little bit because I want to do an offset of the text. I don't want these vector lines going right up to the edge. Like I said, I don't like going up to the edge. So let's back it up for a minute. So we're going to hit undo. We're going to select our text here, and we're going to offset it. Let's convert it to curves. We're going to offset it inward. What did I do last time? A 30 second? A 30 second. 0.03125. Sharp corners. Select new offset. So now that's our line. Now I'm going to hit G for group. Let's try that again. I'm going to hit G for group. So that groups it together. So that'll be my trim, or the you know what I'm using. Now we'll come back over here with these same settings. Give it a little bit of noise. Preview. And okay. And now you can see we're going up to that offset line, right? So now when we're working with that, it's not going to go right to the edge. So with this, again, I can use ball nose, V-bit, end mill, whatever you want. Let's do a V-bit, see what it looks like. Remember, a V-bit's kind of a knife, kind of a slicey knife. And then in Kool-Aid, I'll tell you the 3D scanner. I'll show that in just a second. We'll use a V-bit for the texture on this one. So we'll come into the texture toolpath because I want it to be random. We're going to start at 0, but we're going to use the selected vector as the pattern. And I'm going to go 0.04 to 0.02. We'll randomize between that. But let's use, instead of a ball nose, we'll come back and try a ball nose too. But let's do a V-bit. Let's go with a V-bit. And let's, it's already going right up to the edge, so I don't need to use the boundary offset on that. It's grayed out anyway, that's fine. So let's hit calculate. And let's reset this preview. Now, imagine if I was doing this without raised text, right? I was just doing it like in here. Let me show you what that texture looks like just on the board, right? Let's paint that. Let's fill that in with some color, right? Ooh, interesting. What could we do with that? You know, maybe do an outline around it. We could do just a simple profile cut on the line. You know, let's see. Hold on. Let's see. Let's select our text. All the text. Let's turn off this in the inside border. G for group. Let's go with a profile cut. Let's go down 1/8 of an inch. Let's use a 60-degree V-bit. We'll just stick with a 60 for right now. On the line, calculate, preview, and you know what we've essentially done is, I don't know, we made zebra stripes. Let's go with a non-cut here. So this is just a normal carve, right? But we've given our letters a little bit of a line detail, right? So that's just your standard carve kind of thing, where they're raised on the inside there, and they got some kind of texture on them, right? So that's one thing. That's cool. All right, let's go back to the raised really quickly. Let's go 1, 2, 3, and preview the visible toolpath. We'll see what that looks like. All right, and so here, you know, with the V-bit, again, a V-bit's like a knife. It's just slicing those lines, right? Well, let's take that let's take that texture, that same texture toolpath, but let's use a ball nose, and let's see what the ball nose looks like. Again, it's just going to follow those lines. I like the random textures versus the line textures, but I mean, it's to, you know, each their own. But let's calculate with a ball nose. And let's see what that looks like. And you're going to kind of get the idea here in just a minute. So, yeah, just lines, right? There's nothing cool about it. I mean, it's okay. But, you know, it's just lines. At the end of the day, the vector texture is just a line pattern, a wavy line pattern. I can never wrap my head around it. Not wrap my head around it. I just can't get emotional about it. You know what I mean? I like the random texture that the texturing toolpath gives me. I like it when it chops it up, or when it just gives me that random pattern. I like the chaos. I like the look, you know, and everything. I love that, you know, when I'm looking at this and things, let me make sure that, yeah. So I like that, you know, kind of, like I went in there with a chisel and just kind of chunked it out, kind of pattern and stuff. I really like the, you know, that kind of look. To me, that's, you know, that's fun and exciting, and all the lines I just can't jump on board. All right, now really quickly, let's detour for 2 seconds. A viewer asked what 3D scanner I ended up getting. I ended up getting the Creality Otter Light 3D scanner, Kool-Aid, and just a simple, small handheld scanner that will wirelessly connect to my phone, so I can actually see what I'm scanning and things, versus having to take it to the computer. But it gives me the ability to have a little freedom wirelessly. I can scan small objects, large objects, and things like that. So the Otter Light is what I went with, and that's what I am. That's the one that I'm working with, right? So we'll see how fun that that thing is when it comes in. All right. So now coming back, let's come back and let's bring in some other vectors that we can use to create other textures, and we'll do that by coming in, and I'm going to import one of those images. So let's start off with, and I haven't tried any of these images, ladies and gentlemen. So you and I are going to be experiencing what these graphics that I picked for this class, we will experience them together. So I don't know how the grunge is going to turn out. I don't know how the fish scales are going to turn out. I don't have any preemptive look at any of these. The swirls, don't know how that's going to look, but we'll give it a shot. But I'm going to bring in a couple of these images. Let's start off with the grain. That's a very small thumbnail. Let's also bring in the swirls. We'll see how we can randomize that pattern. Let's bring in the grunge. Grunge is going to be a fun one. I love grunge. The grunge look on a background looks really cool. On a foreground probably would look good too. We'll see. Let's see the scales. We'll bring in both of those. We'll see which way we like. And the scales too. All right, let's start with these. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I need to create some vectors, right? So I have this graphic image and all, but I need to go in and I need to turn them into vectors. So let's go into here and let's turn the fading off. Let's slide our slide bar through until we get a decent looking clean vector line. Let's go with our default corner fit. We'll turn the noise filter up to a 4, preview, apply, and close. And then let's get rid of the image. So we're just left with the vector. Okay. All right. So now we have this vector. So we'll work with that. Let's move that to the side. Let's look at our here. Let's look at our fish scales. Okay. Our fish scale pattern. Let's go into the trace tool, black and white, turn the fading off, slide this to, I'll go more wide lines. So let's go 80. Default corner fit, noise filter, I'll turn up to 3. Preview, apply, and close. Click on the image, delete the image. We have now a scalable vector of some fish scales or whatever. Let's move that to the side. We also have another one here. Let's go to the trace tool, black and white, turn the fading off, slide this to, let's go 75, noise filter 3, preview, apply, and close. Oop. Try that again. Hit apply, not just close. And then on the image, we'll get rid of that. So we got this to work with. We'll see there. We'll play with that. Grunge, the grunge. Let's go to the trace bitmap tool. Black and white trace, turn the fading off. We'll slide this up to 75. Default corner fit, noise filter. There's a lot of noise in this. It's grunge, so I'll turn that down to 2. I actually want the noise and everything. It's meant to be noisy. It's grunge. It's meant to be noisy. Okay. So that's going to be a fun pattern, like paint splatter and things like that. So the grunge is going to be pretty cool. It'd be cool for a background pattern too. We'll play around with that. And then last but not least, let's look at this wood grain trace. Turn the fading off. Turn it to a black and white. Slide this up. Try to pick up this pattern. Preview, apply, and close. And then get rid of the image. Okay, so now I've got some random, textures and stuff to work with, right? So let's start off. We'll start off with the wood grain, okay? And so what I would do with the wood grain here is I would actually probably size it down. And stretch it out to where it's just covering my letters, and pick a spot, pick, kind of a layout, like I might want a little bit of the swirl or something there and everything. And one or two things. Now, if I was doing this for the background, then I would make it cover the entire background vector so I could trim around that background, right? So I could trim around the background and stuff. But this time I'm just focusing on the letters, on the text, right? So I don't want it to be stretched too much on the, I want to get, kind of a nice bit of the pattern. So I'm actually going to kind of condense it down to the letters, just making sure that it covers all of the letters. And then I can come in here and I can, again, I'm going to use the inside vectors. I don't want to go right up to my edge. I like my edges. I like my edges clean. Now, I could run all the way up to the edge of the letter. Not a big deal and all, but I like my edges clean. So I'm going to select my wood grain first, the vectors that I grouped together that represents that 1/32 offset last. And then I'm going to come over here to my trim tool. And my trimming boundary is the thing that I selected last. So I'm going to clear away everything outside of the boundary, and that will leave the what's inside of the boundary inside the boundary, right? So give it a second to process this texture. Now, and that's another thing. While we're waiting for that to process, you'll see that blue line going across the screen. While we're waiting for it to process, when you're dealing with things like this, when you're tracing images and you're turning them into a texture, especially the grunge, there's a lot of vectors in that grunge, a lot of little vectors and all that stuff. The software's got to process this. If your computer takes a minute for things to process, you could be waiting there for a little while, right? So it's got a lot of vectors to deal with right now, and it's got to know what it's trimming, what it's not, what it's getting rid of, what it's keeping, where's it at, blah, 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 whatever it thinks about. And it's going to, it's got to trim and redraw these vectors, and in my case, inside here, right? And that's important, okay? So you just got to be patient with it, especially like when we do the grunge. Even for my computer, when I do the grunge trimming and everything, it's a little bit of a process. It's got to process all those vectors, and it's going to get rid of the things that are outside of a vector, keep what's inside, and it's got to redraw and this and that. And there's a lot of noise there, right? So it's gonna be like it's gonna suck up that processing power. All right, so now what we have is we have the St. John's with kind of this wood pattern right in there. Really nice looking wood pattern and stuff. So let's see what that looks like if we were to carve it. So for the first carve, it's going to be the raised sign. So that's not going to change at all. The raised sign is still the raised sign. It's still my same vectors. Let's go to the 3D view. Let's reset the preview and preview the visible toolpath for the raised sign, right? We know what that looks like. All right, let's cut the wood grain in on this. So on the wood grain, there are closed vectors on the wood grain. So we turn off the text and we turn off that inside vector, leaving only the wood grain selected. We could hit G for group. We'll group it together. But that's a VCarve toolpath. It's not a profile cut on the line, blah, blah, blah. It's a VCarve toolpath. Now we're going to let it, we can let it cut to its natural depth. No end mills are needed, just the V bit. And if the depth is too deep, then we can limit the cut, right? We'll take a look and see, we'll just let it run naturally. First of all, there are 27 open vectors. They're going to be ignored. That's fine. We'll go back and find those. And so I can tell one of the open vectors is down here in the T because, how do I know that? Because, you know, it's missing there. But we've got, you know, kind of this wood grain thing happening here, right? We could even step that back, not do it as raised text. It doesn't always have to be raised text. It doesn't always have to be raised text. We could do that like this, where it's just carved an outline, and you know, the text has got that kind of wood grain pattern in it, right? Whatever it may be. And again, I'm just filling it in with black paint, you know, just to kind of show the contrast, right? But it's got that wood grain pattern in it. And if you want the pattern to be a little bit smaller in there, and not so spread out, then you can make that pattern smaller, and you can lay that pattern, you know, that pattern that we used. You don't have to stretch it all the way out across the whole thing. You can squish it down, and you can have it lay over each word or each letter, right? You can pick and choose. You can trim each letter individually, you know, and boundary and all, and you can pick your pattern. This just makes it where it flows like an actual wood grain, where it flows from one you know, direction to the other, and everything. So it really just depends on what, you know, what you want and all that stuff. Now let's reverse this up. Let's reverse this up. Let's hit undo. And let's go back to here. And let's fill the background. Let's fill the background with this pattern, just so you can see how to do that. So I'm going to have this grain, wood grain, cover the entire board here. And this time I need to do an offset outward away from the letters. And this time on my letters, on my text, because I'm going to be doing raised text, I'm going to be, the letters are going to be 1/8 inch tall. And I'm going to offset away from the letters by 1/8 of an inch. That'll be my offset. So I'm going to select all the outside text. I'm going to offset it outward 1/8 of an inch. I'll keep the sharp corners. Select the new 1/8 of an inch is, it looks like it's a lot, but it's not. Don't worry about it because your angle, the 60-degree angle, it comes around. So that's fine. So I'm going to, it's hard to see. Don't get yourself confused, but I'm going to hit G for group on, on the pink lines here. Select one of the pink lines, hit G for group. That way I don't have to keep trying to reselect them. And then I'm going to select that vector, hold down the shift key and select the boundary as well. And I'm going to group those together. So I'm going to hit ungroup first and then G for group. So now it's all one. Now I have my texture as one group, my boundary is another. So let's go here and clear everything inside the boundary. Inside the boundary. Let me see if I got that right. Inside the boundary. I think I should have said outside. Hold on, let's see. I think I'm an idiot. It should be outside of the boundary. It reverses itself and does the inside on the letters. Outside, I need to clear away the outside of the boundary. Everything outside of this line. On the inside letters, it reverses itself. I think, if I'm thinking right, let's find out. We'll know in 2 seconds here. Yeah. All right, let's undo that. I knew that. All right, one more time. Inside or outside, I want to clear outside the boundary. Outside the boundary. Goofball. Now this should clear everything outside of that boundary line away and then everything inside the letters. It should reverse itself when it comes to the letters, those inside vectors, and it should clear everything inside the letters away. Yeah, this is driving me crazy. I need back in the day, I used to have those Reebok pumps, I need a little pump. A little ball pump. I can pump myself back up. Chair keeps sinking slowly. Yeah, Kool-Aid, I'm curious to know. I'll look up the Revo Point Metro X. I'll check that out for sure and see what it looks like. All right, so there we go. Now, goofball me, I forgot to create my offset. So my texture's running right up under my border. I forgot to create my offset for the texture there. So one more time, edit, undo. I need to come back in here real quick. I need to hit ungroup. Turn off the border. I'm going to hit group again just to keep the text group together because I don't want to have to go through and randomly select all of those vectors. Oh, gosh. Anyway, but I need to select this now and offset it inward. 1/8 of an inch, sharp corners. I'll offset that inward just like that. And then, and you got to remember now, the 1/8 of an inch, it seems like you're like, why are you stepping in so far? Well, from the top of the board down the 1/8 of an inch cut, because I'm carving that pocket around, the 60-degree angle comes out. So at the bottom of the cut, I'm actually out 0.0722 inches. So I'm really only about a 1/16 of an inch away from the bottom of that cut, by doing an 1/8 inch offset. All right, so here's the vector that I want selected with my text. So select the text again. Okay, you can see I selected the text again. Now the text is grouped. I want to ungroup it. U for ungroup. I want to now hit G to regroup it, and it'll be grouped with the boundary as well, right? So they're one item now. All right, so one more time, select the texture first. Hold down the shift key, select that outside boundary second, and then go to the trim tool, clear outside of the boundary, and do it one more time. Sorry. And again, This is just showing what we're going to do here is we're going to do the raised text with this wood grain pattern carved in the background, not on top of the text. All right, all right, all right. And then we'll do the swirls. We'll check out that, but then we're going to switch over and we're going to turn some of those images. This will be the next, coming up parts will be Aspire. We're going to turn some of those images into 3D models, and then we're going to put those 3D model textures on top of the letters. You get to see that. Yeah, I gotta order a new chair. It's one of those things. Got to wait. I only get little spurts of income, so the 3D scanner, and then the 3D printers was first. The scanner was second. I'll get the chair next. But all right. Now, some of my boundaries didn't actually trim to the line. Isn't that interesting? But that's okay. We'll see how that. What happens there. But there's our, now that you can see that wood grain, in the background, right? So let's do our VCarve toolpath on that wood grain. Since it's already selected, it's a VCarve toolpath. Now this time we're starting at 1/8 of an inch because that's all going to be pocketed away, right? So we're going to start at 1/8 of an inch, 60-degree V-bit, no clearance tools needed, and all just the 60-degree V-bit. We're going to calculate that toolpath. Some vectors are open. So let's stop right there. Let's hit cancel. Let's find these open vectors and figure out what's open about them, okay? So we're going to go to the vector validator real quick. And on the vector validator, let me turn off real quick. Let me turn off this, that, and that. Just a grain. So vector validator. Okay, so they're just zero length spans. So what that means is on some of the vectors, there's 2 nodes on top of each other that does not have a line, arc, or curve in between them. So they're called zero length spans. So I'm going to fix the zero length spans, and then that's that. Now let's figure out what the open vectors are. So that was the zero length spans. Now let's right click, select. Let's select vectors all open. Okay. So we come in here and we have these open vectors here. Let's go to our join tool. And there are 18 open vectors. We can go ahead and just hit join and they'll close. Easy peasy, easy fix on that. Easy fix. All right. Let's go back over here. Let's come in here and turn off that vector. Let's turn off the text. And again, a couple of my vectors are crossing over that threshold, so we'll see. But let's calculate that. Remember, like I said, I'm still about 1/16 of an inch away. And let's reset the preview. All right, let's look at our raised sign first. Preview the visible toolpath. Raised sign hasn't changed. That toolpath I created earlier, the toolpath I created earlier, it's still there. And this is that sign with the wood grain texture in the background, right? Right. So what we did here, just so you know, we took an image of wood grain, right? A vector drawing, not a vector drawing, but a drawing, a graphic, right? A graphic of wood grain. We probably could have taken a picture of a board and traced it and got the same kind of graphic, right? But we turned it into a vector. with the vector the first time around a few minutes ago. We stretched it across the letters. We used the vectors of the letters to be the trim. You know, we use the inside vectors, that 3/16 offset, or I'm sorry, that 1/32 offset line. That was our trim boundary, and we trimmed that so that the texture was inside the letters. In this case, we ended up backing up and stretching that wood grain so it covered the entire inner area of our board, and we offset our vectors inward by 1/8 of an inch on the border and outward by 1/8 of an inch on the text. And then we used that vector, those vectors that we created, and we trimmed our wood grain around. You know, we cleared out any of the wood grain that was inside of those vectors, right? And any of the wood grain that was outside of the vector got cleared away as well too. So now, you know, when we look at this, you can see where that, you know, we still have that, you know, 1/16 of an inch or so away from the bottom of our letters where that grain stops, you know, where it carves around. You know, you can see where that bit stops, you know, it carves around those letters and all. So that's how we, you know, we could create you know, a texture from a graphic and all for the background. And we can do the same thing for the foreground, right? All right. Now let's get really, really, really creative. Let's take turn off the border. Let's turn off the text. Let's take this wood grain and hit G for group to group it together. And let's move it out of the way here. Okay. All right. So we saw that. Let's really quickly, let's try the swirls on the top of the letters. Let's try the swirls, see what that looks like. Again, I have no clue what any of this is going to look like, right? So now with the swirls, we could stretch. We could, you know, we could lay, you know, if I didn't want it to be so wide out and stretched, let's say I wanted it smaller, I could literally take my pattern and I could randomly do it over each of the letters, each of the words, right? I could copy that pattern, hold down the control key and, you know, copy it over each of the words so that I have this random burst of pattern, you know, on each of the words or something. But in this case, what I'm doing is I am, you know, covering all the words. Making sure that, you know, it covers. And again, this pattern is just randomness, right? It's just a big old bunch of swirls. And again, we're using the inside vector. So select the swirl first, and that inside vector, that inside vector is that 30-second offset inward. That's my boundary. So I come in here and I trim, clearing outside of the boundary because I'm keeping the texture on the letters. On the letters. We're doing it on the words. We're just giving our text some character, right? That's all we're doing. And it could be, and again, I'm using the St. John's State Park sign, right? It could be anything, right? The Robertsons, it could be anything. Now we're gonna really add some cool textures when we do the blades of grass, the leaves. That's really going to be a texture. Now it's going to be a model type texture, and you carve it like a model, right? So that's really going to dress it up here and all in order to. I'm going to show you how we can use a texture that, you know, comes with our Vectric software in VCarve Pro in desktop and Aspire how we can use the clipping tool to create textures without having to have Aspire. But then we're going to take these pictures that I randomly grabbed off the internet of blades of grass and rock and all that, and we're going to turn those into models and use them as textures. And that's going to wrap us up for the evening. I estimated this to be about a 2-hour class. We're already an hour and a half in, so we're kind of on track. All right, so here's my swirls, my random swirls here. They're a VCarve toolpath, ladies and gentlemen. Just know that. Let's go in and really quickly, let's make sure, select all open vectors. Make sure we have no open vectors. And some of them were selected. So let's go over to the join tool. We had 5 open vectors selected, but it will close. So let's hit join. That way we don't lose any of them, because if we don't join them, it won't carve them, right? All right, let's go in here and let's select this. Let's hold down the shift key. Let's turn off the text and make sure only those swirls are selected, which they are. G for group. That way I don't have to deal with trying to select all those individual vectors individually. Grouping. Now, grouping makes it easier for me. All I have to do now that things are grouped, I can just turn them on and off just with a click. I don't have to go in there and try to click this one and that one and this one and that one and this one. It's a nightmare. Okay. So VCarve toolpath, starting at 0, the top of our board. No need for clearance tools on this case, but some of the vectors are wide, because some of the swirls are wide, so I am going to limit the cut. So we'll set a flat depth, and I'll set a flat depth of 1/16 of an inch. Reset this back to a blank board. All right, once again, just for kicks and giggles, if I preview this, before I do the raised text, that creates kind of this pattern. Let's add some color to it so you can see it, right? That creates this pattern right here. And that's the swirls, right? If I did the outline around that, and just carve that outline in, let's turn the color off. That just does the outline around that. Interesting. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing there. Let's undo that last. All right, so that's our texture there. Now let's do the raise. Okay, and so let's add some surface color to this, and then let's add some let's add a surface color. The material color, let's do we'll go cherry. And then for the surface color, we'll go, I don't know. That's too yellow. I don't know. Pick a color, any color. So that's just the surface color. Let's actually reverse that. Let's reverse that. Cherry is going to be my surface, and then my global fill. The global fill will, fill in, but it could be anything. But that's the swirl pattern. And again, some are going to be hits, some are going to be misses, some are going to be whatever. It is what it is. We're just doing some creative textures. Now, this has all been VCarve and pockets and all that stuff up to this point. Now let's get into let's use models as our texture, and let's do it where we can do it with VCarve Pro, Desktop, or Aspire using our clipping feature. So let me move some of these textures, not move them, but let me move them to layers. Move to a new layer, turn the visibility off. Let's take my outside vector. Let's move that. And I'll actually name this one outside vector offset. Turn off the visibility on that. I'll keep the inside vector for right now. All right, now in my clip art, your clip art may be different, or what have you, but we have models, different types of models and things. And sometimes in the, in the Vectric software, VCarve, Desktop, Pro, Aspire, in your clip art, you may have a textures folder in version 12.5 they're not tileable textures or anything like that, which would require Aspire and all. They're just textures. And they might be things like, tree bark or brush or bushes or basket weave or cracks or fossils or whatever, right? They could be all kind of random things, cracked earth and stuff. And with these textures and all, wood grain, rock grain, grass, all this stuff, these images, or these models, should I say, we can drag and drop them. We can drag and drop them in, and we can size them. Again, I'm just covering the text with it because I want the top of the text. And so on this board, it's kind of, they call it checkerboard mesa wood 3D, but that's that particular text pattern. With this, I need to be able to trim and only keep what's on top of the letters. Now, this is a model, so I can't just go into the 2D trim tool and say clear everything outside of the vector. It doesn't work that way. I have to use the clipping function. So in the 3D view, this is what that texture looks like, right? That's what that texture looks like. And if I come into the component layer, I can, on that level, I'll make another level here, insert a new level, and I'll move this up here. On that level, I will right click and I'll come down to clipping and I'll apply clipping to it. But in order to apply clipping to it, you have to have vectors selected. Now, when it comes to clipping, the vectors you have selected, the vector or vectors you have selected, everything inside the vector will be kept from the 3D model. Everything outside of the vector will be removed. It's not going to be, it's not destructive. It's not going to delete it, but it removes it from the 3D view. Therefore, when you calculate your 3D tool path, only the area that's visible in the 3D view will carve. So if we look here in the 3D view, right now the whole board is showing, right? The whole area right there that model. But if I apply clipping, and again, I'm going to select that inside vector. That's going to be my trim vector, my clipping vector in this case. So if I select the model and I select that inside boundary, when I come in here and I apply clipping, in the 3D view, you're not going to see any change. You're still going to see the full model. You're still going to see your selected vectors and all of that stuff. It's only in the 3D view where you will see that change. And right here, you see how I got that model missing and all? That's actually a glitch in the software. So if you have a big chunk like that or something like missing, like whoa, where'd that come from, whatever, turn your model on and turn it back off. It's a glitch. It is what it is. But anyway, so now that 3D model, that texture is just on the letters, on the top of the letters. Okay. Now, how tall, how pronounced the texture, that's all based on the properties here. So if I brought this down to, let's say, a 30-second, give it a second, you know, it's going to make it very subtle. I'm going to lose a lot of the detail and everything, but it makes it very subtle. Like if I just want a very subtle texture on the letters. Or I could have it, you know, pronounced, right? I could have it quite pronounced on the texture, depending on what I chose, what model from the clip art, what I drug over, right? You know, depending on what it is. Now, in this case, of course, for me, it looks better as a, you know, as a little bit shallower, a little bit shallower in the detail, because it's going to be on the top of the letters when I'm doing the actual, you know, carving and all. And so I'm going to be doing that carving. So let's take a look at what that looks like as a toolpath. Okay. So we're going to have a 3D, and remember now, this is clipped. So this is the visible model right here. So the model is the boundary we could use, selected vectors we could use, that kind of thing when we're doing our 3D. I'm not going to do a 3D rough. I'm just going to go straight to 3D finish. I'll use an 1/8 inch tapered ball nose, or 16/3, whatever, but an 1/8 in this case. Now I can use the selected vector or as the boundary. I could use the model as the boundary. I could even use the selected level as the boundary, right? Either one of those three gets me where I need to be. For this case, I'll just click on selected vector because I've already got those vectors selected right there. And again, it could be either one of the three. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong on that one. I'm going to be doing a raster cut. I still want to cut with the grain on this. Offset, you know, I mean, it really wouldn't matter in this case because I'm going to be using a kind of a wire brush sander, or, you know, not a bristle brush kind of sander to really clean up the grooves and all. But we'll do a raster, calculate. And so what that looks like with no raising or nothing like that, preview the visible toolpath. All right, let's stop right there. Stop. Hold on a minute. Very important, ladies and gentlemen. You see what it just did there? See how deep it's carving in there? That's because your instructor did not go up to the material setup box. And you see where that model is buried in the material down here? Buried. We need it up here at the top of the material. Okay? And if you wanted to, you could, it'll give you a little bit of a lip, so be mindful of that. But you could add a little bit of a, you know, material in there that you know, carves away before it starts carving the model, so you don't have any flat spots and stuff. But you don't want it buried in the wood. That's why you just saw it digging down. Let's recalculate that toolpath. Let's recalculate that. There we go. All right, one more time. Let's reset that preview. Let's turn it back to, just for right now, let's turn it back to maple just so it's visually That's MDF, not maple. So visually, it's a little bit cleaner background we can see. All right, let's preview that visible toolpath. Really nice looking texture there. Okay. Now let's look at this as looks really good. Let's look at this as raised design. All right, keep in mind, remember that 10 thousandths of an inch? That 10 thousandths of an inch I put there, that's that lip you're seeing right there, that 10 thousandths of an inch all the way around, right? You see that? So, you know, I may want that to go all the way to the top. Let's do that again. But you're starting to get the gist of this a little bit. Give me a thumbs up if you are. And all. Pretty cool stuff. Kool-Aid sounds awesome. All right. So we have that, you know, we got that nice texture there. Now, how now, brown cow? Let's say on that same board, not that same board, right? But let's say on we have that model. Let me think about this really quickly. Let me think about this very, very quickly. Let's put this on, let's select this, and let's put this on its own layer. Move to, I'm going to do copy to, no, I'm going to do move to a new layer. And this will be my text model. Okay. So now if I come over here and I turn off the text model layer, it should go away, both in the 2D view and the 3D view. When I turn this off. Yep, very good. Okay, that's what I want. All right, so now I want to duplicate this. I want to come in here and duplicate it. I want to take this back to level 1, turn off level 2 for right now. And the one that's on level 1, I want to maximize this up to my full background. And again, we're still able to do this. This is all Desktop Pro and Aspire. I haven't created any models or anything. I'm using clip art that came with the software. And I can go online to design and make and buy this clip art if I have to, that kind of thing. All right, so now what we're going to do with this is we're going to turn back on our outside vector offset. We're going to turn that vector back on. And on this one, on this level, we're going to select that outside vector. We're going to select the model And we're going to turn clipping on this level. Apply. And what we should see, again, you see that line right through the middle of the state park? You see that line and everything? Crazy. Just turn it off and turn it back on. Crazy stuff. It's just a glitch. All right. So now what you should see is we kind of cleared a hole in that model there, right? Okay. Now, this is important. This is important. We have two models in this instance. We have a model that's going to be on the top of the text. And then we have this model that's going to be at the bottom of the text, which is an 1/8 inch lower. And so we don't want this model to start at the top of the board. And in our material setup here, we have it at the, at the top of the board, right? And when we go into the, 3D finish cut here, the finish cut on the toolpath, when it comes to 3D modeling, there's no start depth. There's no start down here. It's only going to carve the model where the model's positioned in the material, right here. Okay. So this is a 2-stage setup. Okay. Bear with me. The first stage, model position at the top of the material. We're going to be dealing with the model that's on top of the letters, right? We're going to come in. We're going to make sure the model's at the top of the material. We're going to click OK. And we're going to create or calculate that toolpath. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and let me delete everything that is not what we're screwing with right now. So let's delete all visible. And let's move this to the top here. So this is my raised letters, right? The raised letters, that's those 3 toolpaths right there. But this is my 3D model, my 3D finish model. So I got it. I got this one turned on. The model position at the material set up here to the highest point. And I'm going to come in and create this toolpath. I'm using my 1/8 inch tapered ball nose. I'm using the selected vector as the boundary, which is that inside vector right there. You can use model as a boundary too. That's fine. Whatever you want. And I'm going to do a raster cut, and I'm going to calculate this toolpath. Okay. So when I do that, it calculates that toolpath. So that's that 3D toolpath for that part. Done. That toolpath is created. It's there. It's created based off those settings. Now I'm going to come and turn that off, and I'm going to turn my other model on, which is the full board one right here. And I'm going to go into my material setup, and I'm going to change my material setup because I need that to start at an 1/8 inch down. Or, well, I can not, I don't, actually, I'm going to go 0.1. I don't want it to start at an 1/8 inch. I want it to be at 0.1 because I don't want a lip, so 0.1. And I need that model down there because that's where it's going to start. It's going to be the background model. Okay. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me when I click OK, it's going to ask me if I want to recalculate all the toolpaths. No, I don't. No, this is a unique setup for this one toolpath, right? So I'm going to come in here, and again, I've got my clipping turned on, which is that right there. and I'm going to do, you know, my 3D finish toolpath, because all the wood's going to be gone from the pocket cuts, the raised letter cuts and all that stuff. So I can just go straight to a finish cut. And here now, I can use selected vectors, the boundary, materials, the boundary, blah, blah, blah. But on this one, it's important that I make sure I have the right vectors selected. Right? The correct vectors selected. If I'm going to use the vectors as the boundary, it's very important that I have the correct vectors selected. So we'll go ahead and calculate this toolpath. Okay. And so now that's going to carve in the background, but in between here, I need my raise to be done, right? So the raise, you know, the raise toolpath, that's going to be, you know, first. So again, for those of you that need to know how to create the raise toolpath, we use our regular text. That's our regular text font. We use our regular border. Hold down the shift key. It's a VCarve toolpath, starting at 0, cutting, in my case, 1/8 of an inch, 60-degree V-bit. I'm using 2 end mills, a 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch to clean up. I'm doing a raster cut, and we're calculating that toolpath, and that's what gives me the raised letters. Okay, so we've had that from the beginning of the class. All right, so now if we look at this in the 3D view, let's come in here and let's go here, and we can even look at the model on the top. We can look at these three, preview the visible toolpath. So it'll be the cut that's at the top of the letters. It'll be the raise, the model cut that's on top of the letters will be the raise. And that's what it looks like, you know, where the model's on the top of the letters and raised. Now we're going to carve that back model. And it's going around those letters because, you know, that's how we trimmed it and everything. Now, notice how the model looks and everything and all, because I have it, I have it only down where it's only starting at that 0.1. So it's not down at the, 0.125. So it's, the wood was milled down to 0.125. I had the model starting up here at the top. If I change that, let's change that. Let's undo that last for a minute. Let's go back here and let's bring that down to the 0.125. Recalculate. Not this way. Hit no. Right click on this toolpath only and recalculate it for that new position. Now we can preview it again. We'll get more of that detail in there. Half that detail was missing because I started at 0.1 and all the wood all the way down to 0.125 was already milled away, right? So now we have that texture in the background of that model. Again, Desktop, Pro, or Aspire, you can do all this. It's just the clipping. You're using the clipping in the component level. So now we have that where it's the same texture, but we have that wood kind of texture in the background, and it's on the top of our letters too, but not up to the edges, just right on the top of the letters. So we could do that. Okay. Very good. All right, let's create an Aspire model on one of our graphic images. Let's turn this off. And let's create a new level. Insert a new level. Make sure it's active. And now we're going to we're going to create a component from an imported bitmap, from a selected or imported bitmap. And so let's start off with the rocks, the river rocks. Now, when I click on this, and I click OK, it's going to import the rocks as a 3D model. Okay, so the rocks are a 3D model. Now, the height of the 3D model and the texture of the 3D model needs to be adjusted because it's going to just, it's going to pop out as much as the features as we want, as we can get, right? So here, I want to go into the component, and on that rock properties, it's a 1/2 inch tall. Let's bring that down. Let's bring that down a bit, and let's make it a little bit more subtle, so that rock, that textured background, of that river rock and everything. And just so you know, for the reference image, we still got to do the grunge, but this was that image. That's the image that just got turned into a model. Right? So that's this image here. Now, of course, the model is much bigger, right? It's up here. So, we can size it down. We can stretch it out, right? And once again, now, just like clipping and all, we can select, in this case, I'll select the inside vector. And I can turn on clipping, apply clipping. And so the top of my letters has that rock texture now. And again, on my texture, I can settle it up some, it doesn't need to be, let's go 0.04. Give it a second to regenerate, and, we can, however you want it to be. So, but we can use that for our texture. We can do the same thing for the background. Same situation that we did earlier. We can do the same thing for the background, where we use the background vectors to trim on the outside if we wanted the rock texture to be the background and not the foreground. So that's the rock models, right? Let's undo that. I just want just the rocks. So that's the rock model. Let's take a look at if we brought in the there we go. Let's look at the feathers. That would be pretty cool. So the feathers. All right, we got to turn off. Let's go back to our components here, turn off the rocks for a minute. And on the feathers, they're quite tall as well too. So yeah, almost 3/8 of an inch tall. Let's settle those down a little bit. And so we now have a very subtle texture. It's hard to really see without, actually creating the toolpath and all, but we have a very subtle texture that, in its whole state, if we turn the clipping off for a minute, right? So this is the background texture, which would look very nice as a background texture. It would look really, really good as a background texture. But as a foreground texture, we are trimming it. We're clipping it, should I say? We're clipping it to that inside vector. right? And so we're clipping it to that. So it gets rid of everything on the outside and is just keeping this. So that would be the feathers, right? Which would, again, make a beautiful background. Maybe not so much, the foreground could be, either or. We're just, having fun with it. But would definitely make a really nice background. Let's take a look at the blades of grass. Oh, bummer. Oh, let's see if that was just a glitch. Let's see if it does it. If not, my blades. Yeah. All right. Hold on one second. I want some grass. Hold on a second. Blades of grass. Evidently, it wasn't a good JPEG, PNG, Bitmap, for TIFF. When looking for, the images of the blades of grass, you want to kind of an image. I try to look for something that's about a 16 by 9 type image, something where it covers the full area. And so let's see what we have here. Grass. Let's first of all look at the blades of grass. That's the image right here. And again, just the texture. Let's see if it pulls in this time. Okay. All right, so it doesn't, that was the same photo, so it doesn't like that photo. So bear with me a second. I like that photo, but software didn't. So give me a second. Let's save this as grass 2. All right, let's try that. There we go. All right, so here's the model. Let's bring it down in size. It's really huge right now. And again, it's just texture. It's just, that's all it is, texture. So let's go into the components. Let's go to the properties. Right now, it's about 1/4 of an inch tall. Let's settle that up a little bit. 0625. Let's look at it in the 3D view. There we go. And so again, there's that glitch, right? Close this, turn it off, turn it back on. There you go. That's crazy. I gotta update. I'm on 12.502, 12.504 probably fixed that, and I haven't done it yet. Okay. So here's this. Now let's see what this looks like as an actual, as our actual cut. So go back up here, raise this back up to the top. Back up to the top for this setup. No on recalculating the toolpaths. Going to create a new 3D model. I'll call this one grass, just so I know which one it is. And I got to select the vectors. Calculate. And I could use the model as the boundary too, because the model's already trimmed to those vectors, anyway, ladies and gentlemen. So, all right, let's take a look at what this looks like. The raised cut with the grass top letters, preview the visible toolpath, and we'll see how that looks. And then I think you get it. I think you get the gist of what's happening here. All right. So what we're doing is, and again, it could be, you know, let's do the blades of grass as the foreground. Let's do the rock as the background. All right, let's do the rock as the background. So once again, got the blades of grass here. Trimming is applied to that. Let's create a new level. Let's take the rocks, move them up to that new level. Let's bring the rocks. Let's move this to layer, new layer grass, grass. But also let's turn off the visibility here for just a second. Let's grab our rocks. And our last one, let me turn our rocks back on. And on the rocks, and the last one we'll do the grunge. It's going to take the longest to process, and we'll just end with the grunge. But on the rocks, I'm going to have the rocks fill up the whole board because it's going to be the background. Going to select the vector, that inside vector. Come up here and turn on clipping on that level. So what we should see is, when we're not looking at this, what we should see is that. That's the background. And we've already got the grass toolpath calculated. Let's go up here to the job setup. Let's move this one down 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. Again, different setup for just this toolpath that we're calculating right now. So when it asks, do you want to calculate all the toolpaths, we say no. We're creating a new toolpath using the selected vectors as the boundary. That's fine. Calculate. Oh, I should have put rocks. But anyway, 3, 4. All right, so now let's see what that looks like. In the background. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, we did bring in pictures, actual images, and turn them into a model. That feature is an Aspire feature. Okay, so now what we have is we have the top of the letters. It's a little busy, but anyway, and I'm going to show you this without the letters being textured, but the top of the letters have that grass texture while the background has the rocks. Now let's look at it with just the rocks as the background and just smooth letters. So with just the rocks as the background and smooth letters, no texture on the letters. So you can see the background texture and the difference it makes and all that stuff. So bringing in a bitmap image and converting it to a 3D model upon import, that is an Aspire feature. But all the textures that we have or that we could get from, you know, design and make and all that stuff, all of that, you know, we could bring those models in and then we just do clipping. Right? If we don't have Aspire, we can do clipping on it. But here's the sign with smooth letters and just that rock as the background, just to give it some character. Really beautiful background. You know, I mean, really, really sharp looking. Let's see what this looks like as a piece of cherry. All right, just a nice little rock texture background just to give it some character. You know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap us up for the night. I want you to take hopefully some of this stuff that we talked about in, I don't know, maybe you can implement it into your workflow and give your just a change, right? Just something different, putting a texture on the top of the letters, giving it a little bit of character, whether we use the line textures, the vector textures over here, or we use the texturing toolpath and a ball nose bit or whatever to give us a little chunking and everything, or we use, a clip art, texture model that we stretch over and we use clipping to clip it to the top of the letters. I like the inside of the top of the letters, not running right to the edge, but whatever floats your boat. Whatever the case may be, or even using those textures as background textures, and trimming on the out, trimming around the outside. Now remember, on the offset on the outside, let's turn off the model just for a second to hide it out of the way here, just so you know on our vectors. So our normal, this vector right here is our regular, that's our text vector. That's our vector. This inside vector is the 32nd inch offset inward that all the texture was trimmed to, that was on top of the letters. So it stayed a 32nd of an inch away from the edge of the letters on the top. The outside vector here is the 1/8 inch offset outward that trimmed all the background, whatever that we trimmed to get, clear out from the background. And the reason why it was an 1/8 of an inch offset is because from the, our letters were an 1/8 of an inch tall, and from the top of the board down that 1/8 of an inch at a 60-degree angle, the letters are coming out angled, and we're staying away from the bottom of that cut at that 1/8 of an inch, we're still about a 1/16 of an inch away or so, a little under a 1/16, but, so that's why we're so far. That's why it's an 1/8 inch offset on the outward and everything, so that when it trims, when it trims around here, and we're actually looking at the cut, that cut does not cut into the letters. You see that at the bottom of our letters here, and we're not cutting into the letters. That 3D model cut is staying away from them. It's not cutting into them and everything. And that's the purpose for the 1/8 of an inch offset. So that when we trim this sheet away and we end up with this, when we actually stick the letters in the middle of it, they come right up to the edge of that because of their 60-degree angle. All right, everybody, that is that. Hopefully you can take and do something with that, have some fun with it. And yeah, I mean, think of it. It's a great for plaques, outdoor signs, indoor signs, wedding signs, trophies or whatever, memorial plaques, anything like that. So a lot of things that, you could apply this particular technique to, or anything, to just make it different, right? Instead of the same cookie cutter stuff that you've been doing every single day, that's kind of over the years just becoming stagnant, and you want to give give it just a little bit of something different, something you haven't done before, to give it just another look, a little bit of pizzazz, however you want to look at it, hopefully you can take that. And everything I did, ladies and gentlemen, can be done in Desktop Pro and Aspire, except for the last 3 images that we brought in: the grass, the rocks, and the feathers. Those were imported pictures, but they were converted into a model by Aspire using the, create a component from a selected or imported bitmap feature that's in Aspire. That's the only thing that we did. Everything else, we applied clipping and trimming and all of that stuff. We did the texture toolpath, for the the cut, the first textures we did at the beginning of this video. Everything up to those 3 photos was all, you can be done in all 3 softwares. Okay, so it's for everybody. Everybody can do it, just these images, that we turned into a model. That's the only feature that was a Spire feature. All right, everybody. Y'all have a wonderful evening. I want to thank you very much. Yeah, color the letters green, 100%. Yeah, you could do like really quickly. Oh, I want to don't leave just yet. But depending on whatever you do, you could do all kinds of cool stuff, John, for sure. Yep. Your letters, your border, whatever the case may be. Now, really quickly. Let's see how quickly I can do this really quickly. I want to do the grunge real quick. It's not going to look all amazing and great and all that stuff. But I want to, I just wanted to, I brought it in because I do love grunge, the grunge look. And bear with me two more seconds. Let's just do the grunge look on the top of the letters. We won't do it as it's great as a background. Grunge is really cool as a background. But let's do it on the top of the letters, since that's kind of what the class is all about. And we're going to be heavier here on the left. With the grunge, we're going to be heavier here on the left than we are on the right. It's grunge, right? It's grunge, and we could, if we wanted to, we could, kind of stretch it out, so it's not so heavy or whatever, or we could stretch it out so it's not so compact, right? So it's just dirty and grungy, whatever you want. But anyhow, here's what I'm going to do to make it easier for the software to process. I'm going to ungroup this image. Okay. I'm going to ungroup the grunge. This way, anything that's on, I've got it stretched how I want it. Real quick. I got it stretched how I want it. So now anything that's just above the letters and all, that's not so the software doesn't have to worry about all these vectors. I'm going to delete them, right? So I'm going to try to get rid of all the excess crap that is not playing a role with what I'm doing, right? All the stuff that, I want to make sure that when I select it or whatever, it's not like going into the letters. I'm helping the software out some. Right, I'm helping the software out some by cleaning up, and I don't have to go crazy with this, but you know what I mean. You don't have to have all those vectors there. You could help the software a little bit, right? So we'll deal with that. All right, so here we go. We'll go ahead and turn off the border, turn off this border, turn off the two text vectors. Hit G for group. Just to group that together, and then come in and select our inside vector right there and come back to our design tool. And it's the trim tool, the regular trim tool, ladies and gentlemen. We're clearing on the outside of that boundary away. Make sure there's no other vectors selected besides those two. Clear that. Give it just a second. Hang out with me just for a quick minute. Then we'll kind of like end with this. It's the same toolpaths and all. But let's see what... let's see if it's going to take forever. But anyway, so Joe, thanks. I hope you, enjoy that. Ladies and gentlemen, while we're doing that, hold on a second. While we're doing that, let me come over here. While that's processing, give me just a minute. Let me show you. Hold on a minute. Look. I'm just getting started, right? So I got a little Tupperware of my little clips and everything that I'm 3D printing. But they're not the best in the world yet, but little clips. I'm learning how to make things, right? And what these clips are for is it's a limit switch kit set for digital woodcarver machines, digital woodcarver customers. Limit switches for their smaller machines that don't have them. These clips are going to allow them to attach the limit switches to the machines very easily, kind of like make it real plug and play. But I'm, learning all kinds of stuff about 3D printing and everything. And while that's calculating, I'll just pop it up on the screen here. I'm learning about 3D Fusion, right? And, and things like that. I'm working in 3D Fusion, which is kind of interesting. I swore to myself I would never You know, I'm a Vectric guy through and through and all that stuff, but when it comes to the 3D aspect of it and being able to kind of like that, and I think I don't know if it's called parametric or whatever, but being able to step back in the design, make adjustments and changes and everything, and all. Fusion is really done. It's done really good. So anyhow, shout out to Fusion. Sorry, I feel like a Vectric trader. But anyways, so I'm having fun with 3D printing. Who knows? One day I might, you know, I don't know. Not anytime soon. I don't know anything to teach anything, but who knows? You know, we might evolve in the future to 3D printing training and all that stuff. But right now, strictly CNC and all that stuff. But just wanted to share that with you. All right, so it is processing. If we come back and look here, and if I were to come into where's it at? Where's my little I got a button for this. Hold on a minute. There's a yeah, if I turn off the name there, you can see that it's processing. It's a little slow. That's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about with grunge and things like even on my computer. Now this is I just got this computer not too long ago. You know, y'all know, but it's game PC, but it still works. It still works its bones off and all with that too. You don't have to stick around. We're already 2 hours 21 minutes into it. I thought it would be a fun texture to look at. It probably is not going to be all that interesting looking, but I love grunge as a background texture. I like grunge on just not carving raised letters. I like doing grunge textures on boards that are like just regular VCarved in or something like that. Just to when I like if I was doing it in plywood or something like that and everything or whatever the case may be, MDF and all, it just gives it a distressed, distorted, dirty look, especially if I do a really good job with you know, painting and all that stuff. When it comes to finishes and your textures, while we're talking on this stuff, when it comes to finishes and textures and all, if you have never tried it, gilding, you know, like gold gilding or silver gilding and all, but the faux gilding, you know, not the real gold, unless you're, you know, selling some expensive signs and stuff. But gilding is phenomenal. I go to Hobby Lobby and get little gilding kits and all, and I can, on my raised letters and everything, the little adhesive glue and everything, I can glue right up to on the edges and all. Drop in the gilding film, and then, you know, brush away all the excess and stuff, keeping the letters gilded, and especially in the texture area too. You know, I like that. That's why I like the offset from my edges, is because I can fine line and just where the gilding is inside the texture, and whatever the case may be. That's a fun finish. I like doing that on, if any of you have ever heard of quarter board signs. If you've never heard of a quarter board sign, great signs to make, very good signs to make money on if you're near any kind of coastal areas or water areas or ship, you know, where there's lots of boats and ships and marinas and things like that. Quarter board signs, and they're also great for houses and all that stuff too. But anyway, quarter, like a quarter of an inch or a quarter board. It's basically, it's kind of a play on the old oak ships, the front quarter. It was the you know, the ship's names and everything. So usually when you see quarter board signs like on houses or anything like that, that has some kind of nautical play, you know, to it. You know, mermaid avenue, or whatever. I can't even think of any nautical terms right now. But anyhow, quarter board signs. If you've never seen them, check them out. Ladies and gentlemen, it's processing. It's moving. It's a quarter of a way done, but you can see that it's moving slowly because there's a lot of vectors for it to trim and redraw. So if you don't hang out, I understand. I'm going to stay till the very end, but I want to thank each and every one of you for all you do. We appreciate you. And yeah. So couldn't you have modeled it in SketchUp or tried Tinkercad? Are you talking about, John, are you talking about the parts? Oh, yeah, I could have made my parts in SketchUp. But I don't have the paid SketchUp where I can't export the parts out as an STL model, right? And I don't want, if I'm going to pay for anything, I'm using the free version of Fusion 360 to test out, and then I'll move into the big boy version. But right now I'm just doing it to learn. And I have I've had failures, right? You know, that was a print, or well, it was supposed to be, but I've had failures, many. I'm looking around, I got filament everywhere, but yeah, so bed leveling, I've gone through tips, clog tips and everything, and you know, bad tips and good tips, and buying new tips, and I'm just learning, you know, all kinds of stuff, right? So it's all learning, but yeah, I'm very proficient in SketchUp. I just can't export the model files out because I'm in the free version of the SketchUp. I make my models in Aspire. I can model in Aspire too. I just can't do the undercuts, you know. I can't see the undercuts and all. And in Fusion 360 and Tinkercad, FreeCAD is another one. SketchUp, you know, all of those. Blender, I'm decent in Blender. I'm very good in ZBrush. Make some models in ZBrush. So yeah, I don't think it's gonna process fast enough for you folks. But anyhow, y'all have a wonderful evening. Y'all take it easy. We'll catch you later. And yeah, this is why I didn't do the grunge. I knew I wanted to bring it in. I was like, man, I want to give it a try, but I knew it was going to take a long time to process and all that stuff. But and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a little lackluster, to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to be all that, oh, it was worth the wait kind of thing. So I wouldn't wait around. Ladies and gentlemen, I would just call it a night. But yeah, Tinkercad is free. John, Tinker is it Tinkercad or Tinkercad? Tinker or Thinker, but it might be Tinkercad. But FreeCAD is free as well too. I have FreeCAD. FreeCAD, is that what it's called? Hold on. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, FreeCAD. FreeCAD is free also. FreeCAD, I got that and everything. But yep. All right. Well, let's not end on a slow note like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on this, and we're going to go back to the 3D view and just enjoy what we made here as the ending of my video, ladies and gentlemen. And until next time, maybe we'll play with grunge on another class, another day where we actually have some time, and I can you know, see what I can do to speed things up. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Y'all have a wonderful evening. We'll catch you later. See you next week. Take it easy.